Hey guys, welcome to Essentials Week 22, Lesson 22. We are doing things a little differently this week, obviously. I am not live with you, I'm pre-taping this lesson, and we're just going to do things, like I said, a little differently. There will be times during this lesson where I ask you to pause the video so you can work on your own, and when you're done, you can restart the video and we'll pick back up with the lesson. So, other than that, everything should be fairly the same. You're kind of used to the way I do things. I will be live, available for questions. If you get through the entirety of this lesson and you're like, I don't get what's happening, I don't understand this. I'm hoping to set up a WebEx meet, a WebEx hangout, whatever you call it. So I will be available to answer questions for 30 minutes between 2:30 and 3 p.m., the time that we would normally be doing our IEW. So with all that said, let's open in prayer and just thank the Lord that we are able to do this through technology. So. Lord God, thank you for this day. Thank you for these students and these families. And I just pray that you bless our time together, even though we're not together. You tell us that you're always with us, and so we can take comfort in that, even if we can't be together. So I just pray that you bless this lesson, and that maybe this opens doors for things that we haven't imagined in the future. In your name we pray. And keep everybody safe and healthy. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so last week we introduced the compound complex sentence structure and we reviewed the SVI and the SVTDO patterns. We also introduced compound subjects, verbs, direct objects, and prepositional phrases, and we talked about verbals, specifically infinitive verbals. So remember that an infinitive is just to plus a verb, so to play, to dance, to laugh, etc., etc. This week we will continue to work with the compound complex structure, and we will review the SVLPN and the SVLPA sentence patterns. We'll also introduce a new verbal, the past and present participles. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to press pause on the video, and I want you to come up with your own example of an SVLPN. And when you're done, you can restart the video. Okay, so you should have come up with something like, Jesus is king. You could have come up with anything. Tom is the captain. Jane is a baker. Just remember that with the SVLPN pattern, this word, the predicate nominative, has to be a noun or a word acting like a noun. If you put something like Jesus is amazing, that's an adjective, that's a predicate adjective. We'll do that in a minute. So double check that you have a subject, a verb linking, and a predicate nominative, something that's a noun or a word acting like a noun. Once you've done that, I want you to press pause on the video again, and I want you to turn this simple SVLPN into a complex sentence. So let's remember, what makes a complex sentence? A complex sentence is one independent clause and at least one subordinate clause joined by a www.asia.wub word or a relative pronoun. So you know what your www.asia.wub words are. Your relative pronouns are going to be your who-which clauses. So you're going to include either a who-which clause or a clause that includes a www.asia.wub word. So press pause, come back when you're done. Okay, so hopefully you came up with something like either Jesus who loves me is king, or Jesus is king because he is Lord. So notice in this first example, I've used a relative pronoun to introduce my subordinate clause. And how do I know it's a subordinate clause? Let me go through this. So Jesus who loves me is king. Who or what is my subject of the sentence? Jesus. What's being said about Jesus? He is, right? Jesus is who or what? He is king. Now, at first glance, I might think that's a direct object, but I have to ask myself, does king equal Jesus? Can king replace Jesus? Can I say the king is Jesus? Can I swap those two things? If those answers are yes, then I know it's not a direct object. We can also double check this by asking ourselves, is Jesus doing anything? If he's not doing something, then there's no object to receive that action. So I have a linking verb and a predicate nominative here. In the middle, who loves me? Do I have another subject? I do. What's being said about who? Loves. Who loves who or what? Me. That's my direct object. But who loves me? In the declarative, can that be a sentence all by itself? No, it can't. So it depends on Jesus is king. So right here I have a complex sentence, right? One independent clause, one subordinate clause. And I've chosen in this sentence to use a relative pronoun. Now in this one, Jesus is king, I've already established that this is an SVLPN because he is Lord. So I've used one of my www.asia.wub words here, my subordinating conjunction. He is Lord. I have another subject, verb linking, predicate nominative pattern here. All right? So hopefully you did something like that. Again, there'll be a time for questions if you're not following totally along, that's fine. But what I want you to do right now is I want you to press pause again, and I want you to turn your sentence that is right now complex, I want you to make it compound complex. So remember that a compound sentence has two independent clauses, at least two independent clauses, joined by a fanboy. So in order to turn this complex sentence into a compound complex sentence, you are going to have to add another independent clause with a fanboy. So press pause and do that right now. We'll see what you come back with. So hopefully you did something like this for your first example. Jesus who loves me is king. We already established that that is a complex sentence because it has one independent clause and one subordinate clause. And, what kind of word is and? You all know that that's a coordinating conjunction. He is Lord. Do I have another subject and verb here? Indeed I do. He is my subject. Is my verb. Can I say he is who or what? I can. He is Lord. Is this a direct object? It is in fact a noun. But can I say Lord equals he? He equals Lord? I can. Is he actually doing anything? Is there any action taking place here? No. So this is not a transitive verb. It's a linking verb. And so I have another predicate nominative. In my second example, Jesus is king because he is Lord. We already established that that's a complex sentence. Here I've added a different fanboy. I used for this time. He loves me. All right, let's look at this. Do I have another subject? I do. He, what's being said about me? He loves, there's my verb. Can I answer the question, he loves who or what? Yeah, he loves me. Is me a noun? Yes, it is. Is he doing anything? Yes, he's loving. So this is what type of verb? Transitive. So if I have a subject verb transitive and I can answer the question, he loves who or what, then I have a direct object here. Okay, so that's an example of how we create a compound complex sentence structure. Okay, so let's try the same thing now with the subject verb linking predicate adjective pattern. So what I want you to do right now is press pause again, come up with your own subject verb linking predicate adjective pattern, and we'll come back and we'll look more at that. Okay, so hopefully you came up with something like Jesus is kind. So if we look at this sentence here, here's my subject, right? Jesus. What's being said about Jesus? He is who or what? He is kind. So let's ask ourselves a couple of questions. We might be tempted to think that's a direct object. Kind, is that a noun? Is that a person, place, thing, activity, or idea? No. It is what type of word? It's describing Jesus, right? So what type of word describes a noun? An adjective, right? And if we have this subject verb, what type of verb is this? Is it an action verb? Is Jesus doing anything? No, he's just being something, right? So we've got a linking verb here. So if you have subject verb linking and this is not a noun, it's an adjective, what do we have here? A predicate adjective, right? Okay, so let's do the same thing again. Let's press pause on the video and let's turn this simple subject verb linking predicate adjective sentence into a complex sentence. So again, you're going to use either a www.asia.webword or you're going to use a relative pronoun. So like a who, which clause, okay? So press pause. Hopefully you came up with something like Jesus is kind while he is truthful, or Jesus who is generous is kind. So let's look at both of these sentences here. Jesus is kind. Can that be a sentence all by itself? Yes, it can. So we do have one independent clause here. We already established that. While he is truthful. What type of word is while? Well, you know because you've memorized. It's one of our www.asia.webwords. So we call that a subordinating conjunction. Do I have another subject and verb here in this pattern? Let's see. He is truthful. Is there a subject? Yes, it's he, right? And what's being said about he? He is. He is who or what? He is truthful. Now, if we think about this word, is this a noun? Is this a person, place, thing, activity, or idea? It is an adjective. It's describing somebody, right? It's describing he. So if we have an adjective here, we most likely have a subject, verb, linking, predicate, adjective pattern, but let's just double check. Is he doing anything? Is this an action verb? No. He's just being something, right? So we do indeed have a verb linking predicate adjective pattern. While he is truthful, could that be a sentence all by itself? No, it doesn't make complete sense, right? We need 5 things to make a sentence: a subject, a verb, a capital letter, an end mark, and it has to make complete sense. So while he is truthful, doesn't make complete sense, couldn't be a sentence all by itself. So we do have a complex pattern here. So we have 1 independent clause, 1 subordinate clause. Down here, we already established that Jesus is kind. That can be a sentence all by itself. That's an independent clause. Who is generous? Do I have another subject and verb here? Let's see. So I've got a subject, I've got my verb, and what type of word is generous? Is this a noun? Is this a person, place, thing, activity, or idea? No, it's another adjective, isn't it? So let's just double check and make sure that this is a linking verb. Is who doing anything, or is who just being something? Just being something, right? So that's a linking verb, and this is indeed another predicate adjective. Who is generous in the declarative? Can that be a sentence all by itself? No, it doesn't make complete sense, does it? So here we have 1 independent clause and 1 subordinate clause. So this is another example of a complex the complex structure. So you see that with the complex structure, you need either a www.age.web word or you need a relative pronoun to generate your subordinate clause. Now you'll notice that both of these sentences, the SVLPA pattern repeats, but just in a slightly different way. But in both sentences, only one of them is independent. So you can have the same pattern repeat, but it's not always going to express itself in the same way, or it's not a guarantee that it's an independent clause. Okay, so let's do the same thing again. Let's press pause on the video, and you now make your sentence compound complex. So remember, that means you're going to add another independent clause joined by a fanboy. All right, so hopefully you came up with something similar to this. We've already established that this sentence, Jesus is kind while he is truthful, is a complex structure, and he lives. What kind of word is and? Let's see if we have another independent clause here. We know that and is one of our fanboys, our coordinating conjunction. Let's see if we have another subject and a verb. Do we? Yes. He is another subject. What's being said about he? He lives. Can I answer the question, he lives who or what? No, there's no object here, right? But is he doing something? Yes, he's living. So this is an action verb. It's not a linking verb. But if there's no object receiving the action, then what type of verb is it? Hopefully you said intransitive. If you said intransitive, you would be right. So, Jesus is kind. Can that be a sentence all by itself? Yes, it can. That's 1 independent clause. He lives. Can that be a sentence all by itself? Yes, it can. So we have 1, 2 independent clauses, and we've already decided that while he is truthful is a subordinate clause. So we do, in fact, have a compound complex structure in this sentence. What about this one? We've already done this parsing in the last bit. Yet he loves sinners. Yet is another one of our fanboys, right? Another coordinating conjunction. Let's see if we have another subject and a verb here. He loves sinners. Who or what is that clause about? He, right? That's my subject. What's being said about he? He loves. And can we answer the question, he loves who or what? Yes, he loves sinners. So that would be what? A direct object. Good. So if we have a subject, verb, direct object, what type of verb is this? Hopefully you're saying transitive. If you said transitive, you would be right. So we have 1 independent clause here, right? We already talked about that. He loves sinners. Can that be a sentence all by itself? It certainly can. So we have 2 independent clauses. We already decided that who is generous is a subordinate clause. So again, we have the compound complex structure here. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, just make a note of it. I'll be available to take questions in a little while, depending on when you're watching this. So let's talk about verbals. So last week, remember that we discussed infinitive verbals. This week, we are discussing the participle. Unlike infinitive verbals, which can act as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs in sentences, participles usually only act as adjectives. Participles are either in the present tense or in the past tense form of a verb. For regular verbs, these will end in either ing or ed. So ing would be present participles, and ed would be past participles. So when I use the word past participle, what am I actually talking about? I'm talking about, hopefully you remember this from last week, a verb form that's acting like another part of speech. It's not acting like the verb in the sentence. They're easy to misdiagram because a lot of times when you see an ing word or an ed word, you might be tempted to think, oh, that's a verb. And you are right, it is a verb, but it's just not acting like a verb in that sentence. So what is an example of a present participle verb? Jumping, playing, laughing, anything like that. Ed would be jumped, played, laughed. So that would be an example of a past participle verb. So let's take a look at participles acting like adjectives. So if I say, don't awaken the sleeping giant, let's look at this sentence for a minute. Who or what is my subject here? I'm throwing you a little bit of a curveball. Hopefully, you're looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, what purpose is the sentence? Is it declarative, imperative, exclamatory, or interrogative? If you said imperative, you are right. It's a command, right? I'm telling you to do something. Don't awaken the sleeping giant. So in an imperative sentence, who is the subject? If you said the implied you are correct. So you as my subject, what's being said about you? Don't, right? Is that it? Is it you don't? Or is it you awaken? Well, it's kind of both, right? Don't awaken. What's my main verb here? Awaken. Hopefully you said awaken. So what would don't be? I have 4 choices when it comes to verbs, right? Verb linking, verb helping, verb transitive, and verb intransitive. So what do you think it would be? I'm hoping that you said helping verb, because you were right. Okay, so don't awaken what? Don't awaken who or what? The giant, right? So if I can answer that question, you don't awaken who or what, then I have a direct object. So if I have a direct object, what type of verb is this here? Hopefully you said transitive. If you did, you'd be right. But what about this word? What about sleeping? That's a verb, right? That's something that somebody does. However, in this sentence, what is it doing? It's not the action. The giant isn't sleeping and you aren't sleeping, right? What's it doing? It's describing the giant. So what type of word is giant? What part of speech, if you think about your 8 parts of speech? Giant is a noun, right? It's a person, place, thing, activity, or idea. So if sleeping is describing this noun, what part of speech would this be acting like? What part of speech modifies a noun or describes a noun? Well, hopefully you said adjective. If you said adjective, you would be right. So in this particular sentence, this verb form is acting like an adjective, and we call that a participle. This, because it's ing, would be a present participle verb acting like an adjective. Let's take a look at an example of an ed, a past participle verb acting like an adjective. Okay, so here we have a sentence, the decayed tooth fell out. So who or what is the subject of the sentence? What's the sentence about? It's about the tooth, right? So there's my subject. And what's being said about the tooth? What's it doing? It's falling, right? Can we answer this question? The tooth fell who or what? No. There's no direct object receiving that action. So what type of verb is that if there's no direct object receiving the action? Well, hopefully you said intransitive. If you did, you'd be right. And what about the word out? What type of word is that? It's not a direct object. It's not a noun. It's not a person, place, thing, activity, or idea, right? So what question does it answer? I would say it answers the question where. Where did the tooth fall? So if a word answers the question where, what type of word is it? Hopefully you said adverb. If you did, you would be right. It's giving us more information about the verb, right? It's telling us how the tooth fell. It fell out. But let's think about these other words. We know that the word the is an adjective. We've just memorized that, right? And what about the word decayed? Now that is a verb. I could say the tooth decayed. In that sentence, we would be using this word like a verb. It is a verb. It's an action word. But in this sentence, is the tooth decaying? No, the tooth's falling out, right? So what is this word giving us more information about? What is it doing? It's giving us more information about the word tooth. So is the word tooth a person, place, thing, activity, or idea? Is this a noun? Indeed it is. And what type of word modifies a noun? If you said adjective, then you are correct. And so in this instance, this verb is acting like an adjective. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about verbs present participle and past participle verbs that are acting like different parts of speech. Okay, so a few things I just need to mention really quick because they're in the book. They give you 2 examples in there. The participle may often be part of a larger phrase that includes additional modifiers, such as, now I'm not going to go through diagramming every word of the sentence, but you can see here in the book what they're trying to point out. Struggling vigorously, the disciples fell asleep. In the book, it tells you that this participle phrase, so remember the difference between a clause and a phrase. A clause has a subject and a verb. It's a group of words with a subject and a verb. A phrase is a group of words without a subject and a verb. So here we have a group of words without a subject and a verb. Struggling vigorously, the disciples fell asleep. So we have a present participle here. It's not the verb in the sentence. The disciples are not struggling, right? They're falling asleep. However, in the book it tells you that this is an adjectival present participle phrase. I disagree. I think it's actually adverbial. It's up to you. You can decide. In the book it says it describes the disciples. I kind of think it describes how they're falling asleep. But I'll leave that up to you. That's just my personal opinion. I just wanted to point that out. Another example from the book, labeled a failure. The sad child cheated on the exam. So in this example here, we can see labeled a failure is a phrase, a participle phrase, that is giving you more information about the child, right? The child would be my subject, cheated would be my verb. Can I answer the sad child cheated on who or what? Or sorry, the sad child cheated who or what? No. So this is actually an intransitive verb. The word on is a preposition. So this is my object of the preposition. We know that's an adjective. And what type of word is sad? There's another adjective describing a child. And you can see that this whole phrase here, another adjective, is describing the child. So this whole thing is acting like an adjective, but you can see that we have a past participle verb in there. The word labeled is a verb, correct? It's an action word. But here it's acting, along with these other words, like an adjective to describe the child. Now this is something that they won't tell you in the book. If you're thinking, well, how would I diagram something like that? I'll show you in just a minute. I had to do a little research to figure this out. They would call the word failure a complement, just sort of like the idea of an object complement noun or object complement adjective, a complement noun to this participle. I'll show you how to diagram in a second. But first I want to show you how to diagram participles in general. So if I am looking at the sentence, weeping Jesus prayed, who or what is my subject here? It's Jesus, right? What's being said about Jesus? What's he doing? He's praying. Is he weeping? Are we saying Jesus is weeping? No. The word weeping is a verb. It's something that you do. But in this sentence, well, first of all, what type of verb is that? Hopefully you know that's an intransitive verb. In this particular case, the word weeping is describing Jesus, right? So even though it's a verb, it's acting like what? An adjective. A word that describes a noun is an adjective, right? So if we were going to diagram this, we would put our subject here and our verb here. And then remember, modifiers always go under the thing that they're modifying. So you would put it in the same place that you would a regular adjective. So if we said, sad Jesus prayed, or glorious Jesus prayed, whatever kind of adjective we're using, we're always going to put under Jesus. But instead of a straight line, normally we put adjectives on a straight diagonal line like this. We're going to put it on a curved line like that. So I would put my participle on a curved line under the thing that it's modifying. So if I was going to diagram this sentence here, the sad child cheated on the exam, labeled a failure, the sad child cheated on the exam, it would look like this. And then I'm going to put all of my modifiers where they go. So labeled a failure, and they're going to go in the order that they come in the sentence. So I'm going to start with my slanted line like that. So it's a little like a prepositional phrase, and it's a little like an infinitive phrase. So that's how that phrase would look labeled. So your complement is going to go in the spot, like like where a direct object would go. And then I'm going to put sad child. Am I missing anything? Okay, no, I got it. All right, so this is how this would look. And again, that's not in the book, but I just wanted to show you in case you had any questions. Okay, I'm going to put some sentences up on the board now. When I get done, you're going to press pause. You're going to diagram the sentence at home. And then when you're done, press play, and I will have it diagrammed for you, and then you can see if you got it right, okay? Here are your 3 practice sentences. First one, for first years, Solomon, who is creative, is gracious. The second one, Balin, notice I spelled your name right, who is talented, is strong, and he is an educated outdoorsman. And lastly, Drumming Luke, who is an educated musician, is smart, and he is a student at music school. That's for third years. All right, bonus third years if you are also labeling your cases in Latin. So press pause right now, pick a sentence to do, and we'll come back and you can see if you got it right. All right, those were some difficult sentences. So hopefully, I have a lot of faith in you. I'm sure you guys got everything right. But let's just go through it really quickly together. So the first one, Solomon, who is creative, is gracious. Who or what is this sentence about? Solomon, what's being said about Solomon? He is, verb linking, gracious, predicate, adjective. In here in the middle, who is creative? We have another subject, verb linking, predicate, adjective sentence. Repeating. So this is what this would look like, right? We've got one independent clause. Solomon is, whoops, oh shoot, I put creative 2 times. Solomon is gracious. And we have a subordinate clause, who is creative, that's coming off of Solomon, right? Who is creative is giving us more information about Solomon, so that's where we would, connect it with just a line, right? Okay. Or is it a dotted line? I'm blanking right now. All right, you can fix that later. Okay, the next one, Balin, who is talented, is strong, and he is an educated outdoorsman. Who or what is my sentence about? Balin, what's being said about Balin? He is strong, verb linking, predicate, adjective. Who is talented? There's another subordinate clause, subject, verb linking, predicate, adjective. Here's my coordinating conjunction, and he is an educated outdoorsman, subject, verb linking, and this is my predicate nominative, right? Outdoorsman is a person, place, thing, activity, or idea. And then I have 2 adjectives right here. Here's my past participle verb acting like an adjective. It's describing outdoorsman. So in my diagram here, that's going to go on a slanted line under outdoorsman. I kind of ran out of space there. Okay. Last one, Drumming Luke, who is an educated musician, is smart, and he is a student at music school. Again, here's a present participle verb acting like an adjective, giving me more information about Luke, who is my subject, right? So when I'm diagramming that, it's going to go under Luke on that slanted line. And just for the record, I can't remember if I said this or not, you diagram both participles the same way, so whether it's present or past, they both go on that curved line under the thing that they're modifying. All right, so Luke, what's being said about Luke? He is smart, verb linking, predicate, adjective. Who, and here's my subordinate clause, who is an educated musician. Who is my subject? Is my verb. Musician is my predicate nominative, because that is a person, place, thing, activity, or idea. Again, here's another verb, educated, that's acting like an adjective, modifying musician. It's giving you more information about what kind of musician he is, right? And there's my coordinating conjunction. He is a student, another subject, verb, linking, predicate, nominative sentence pattern at music school. So at, we know, is a preposition. School is my object of the preposition. Music is an adjective describing school. So this is what it would look like diagrammed. Remember, when you're diagramming independent clauses, you always connect the verbs. So I'm connecting is to is. My prepositional phrase is going to go under my verb because it's answering the question where, right? Where is he a student at music school? So that makes it adverbial. Just remember, when you're diagramming, you can always ask yourself, what question is this word answering, right? Like, for instance, here, Balin is strong, he's an educated outdoorsman. Well, educated is answering the word what kind? What kind of outdoorsman? So we know, even though it's a verb, it's acting like an adjective. So you always have those question confirmations to fall back on as well. All right, I hope I didn't go too fast. I hope everybody kind of kept up with everything that we were doing. If you have any questions, just write them down. I'll be happy to answer them. Welcome back. We all had a nice lunch. Now we will dive into the writing portion of our afternoon. We are back to IEW. So we're just coming off of a little break that we took. We used a different curriculum for the last 3 weeks called The Lost Tools of Writing. So now we're going back to IEW and we are completing the curriculum of IEW with Unit 9, the critique. You will notice that some of these elements in Unit 9 are familiar. They kind of harken back to Unit 3. I don't know if y'all remember when we did the narrative storytelling. So a lot of this stuff is going to be familiar, at least kind of the middle portion of it. But really what we have to ask ourselves is, what is the purpose of a critique? A critique is a skill that we want to develop, helping students to analyze literature. So what we want to do is try to ask them to think about what the characters' motives are, what they're doing, and then at the end of the critique, they will be asked to give their opinion. So the things that make the critique different than the other 5-paragraph papers that we've written are the intro and the conclusion. So what kind of stories can you critique? Well, really anything that tells a story. So it could be a work of fiction, nonfiction, it could be a poem, it could be a fable, it could be a song even. A lot of country songs have interesting narrative stories. So the length of the story doesn't matter, it just has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and a conflict and a resolution. All right, so let's look at our intro. So remember now we're going back to the keyword outline. We're done doing the other type of outline that we did. So we'll be going back to using the 3 keywords. The first thing we want to do is open with a dramatic opener. We can use the same technique as we've been using from Lost Tools. So a quote, a command, what was the other one? Question? Yes, a question, a quote, or a command. And then we want to give a little bit of a background. So we want to talk about the type of story. Is it a fable? Is it a, like I said, is it a work of fiction? Is it a saga? Is it narrative? So we kind of want to tell what type of story it is. We want to give the title, the author, and then the genre. Now you'll notice that these 3 paragraphs here are just lifted out of Unit 3. So these should all be really familiar to everybody. If you recall, we'll introduce the characters and the settings. Are there people, animals, the place, the time, the mood? What do they want? What are their motives? The one little caveat that differentiates Unit 9 from Unit 3 is that we don't want to, we want to just sort of briefly give the audience the data. We don't necessarily want to retell the story like we were doing in Unit 3. So this is a little more academic, I guess, than flowery or embellished. And then the second paragraph, we want to introduce the conflict and the plot, the problems and or the plan. And in paragraph 4, we're going to talk about the climax and the resolution, the turning point, the outcome. And the concluding paragraph is going to be new. So this is something that we haven't done yet. So your student is going to be asked to analyze the story that they wrote. So they're going to tell the reader if they liked or disliked it. Was there a message or a theme? Was it worth reading? Why or why not? And then here's the most important thing. You cannot use the word I when you're writing your conclusion. So you're not going to say, I liked it because blah, 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 blah. You're going to say, this is a fabulous story because blah, 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 blah. And the reason that we don't want to use the word I is because we want to train the students to realize that a lot of people write and they infuse their own opinion as fact. And so we kind of want to train them and help them see that, hey, if I'm doing that, other people are probably doing that too. And it just helps them to be more discerning when they read, whatever they're going to read out there in the world. So we'll touch on that again later. But what I thought we would do is use the story of Cinderella as a model here. So I know we can't be interactive today. Usually that's what we would do, but I'm just going to model this for you, and then maybe what we'll do is stop down occasionally and have you all write your own paragraph. Okay, so the story of Cinderella, everyone's familiar with. Cinderella trapped in a house with her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, and she meets, finds the fairy godmother, goes to the ball, meets the prince, and then her stepsisters try to stop her, but they don't. She's helped by her animal friends. Her and the prince reunite, and they live happily ever after. All right, so how can I open this story with a dramatic opener? I'm going to open with a command. I'm going to open with, let's see, imagine you're trapped in a mansion. So my 3 key words are going to be imagine, trapped, mansion. And now I'm going to tell the type of story. So it's a fictional story. I'm not exactly sure when it was written, but that's also some other information I could put in here. So I'll say, let's see, fictional, let's see, maybe I'll just make something up. I'll say it was written in 1850. That's probably not true. 1850, and I'll just leave it there for now. The title of the story is Cinderella. The author, I actually don't know, so I'll put the author's unknown. And the genre, the style, is a fairy tale. And it's aimed towards children. So I'll put fairy tale, children. So now I have my keyword outline for my first paragraph. So now I'm going to move to the second paragraph, introduce the characters and the setting. So who are my characters? Well, there's quite a few, right? So I'm going to put Cinderella, stepsisters, fairy godmother, and then I'm going to draw a little crown for the prince. All stepsisters, fairy godmother, and a crown for the prince. The place, the time, and the mood. All right, let me see. I don't know exactly when it took place, but let's say it's springtime. And so springtime, probably in England, right? And the mood is, I would say it starts with a hopeful mood. Cinderella's pretty hopeful. What do they want? What do the characters want? What are their motives? So Cinderella wants to go to the ball. So Cinderella wants ball. And the stepsisters don't want her to go to the ball. So we'll do stepsisters do not want her to go to the ball. Ball for Cinderella. And let's see. The prince wants a wife, doesn't he? So prince wants wife. Or at least that's what his father wants for him, right? Okay. The conflict and the plot. All right. So what are the problems? Well, the main problem is Cinderella is locked in her bedroom. So Cinderella, well, actually the first problem is she doesn't have anything to wear, right? And that's when we meet the fairy godmother. So maybe I'll start with that. So Cinderella needs dress. And then what happens? Her fairy godmother comes along. So let's see, fairy godmother gives her the dress. So fairy godmother gives dress. And then what happens? The stepsisters ruin the dress. So stepsisters ruin dress. And then they lock her in her bedroom. So lock Cinderella bedroom. And the mice come to help, right? The animals come to help. Animals help. Okay. And then the climax and the resolution. So the climax is she goes to the ball and she loses her slipper. So let's see. Cinderella goes to the ball, loses slipper. And then what happens? The footman comes around and tries the shoe on. So let's see, footman tries shoe. It doesn't fit the stepsisters. So stepsisters don't fit. But it fits Cinderella. She she reunites with the prince and they live happily ever after. So Fitz reunites and then happily, I'll put. Okay, so I've just kind of basically given the whole rundown of Cinderella, and now it's time for my conclusion. So did I like it or did I not like it? I liked Cinderella, but I'm not going to say I liked Cinderella. I'm going to say Cinderella worth reading. Is there a message or a theme? I think the message would be true to yourself, or, you know, love conquers all maybe. So I'll put love conquers all. Let's see. What else can I say about maybe goodness is rewarded? And why is Cinderella worth reading? It's uplifting, it's inspiring, and it will leave feeling what? Encouraged. So as you see, the words I have chosen for my conclusion are, I'm answering these questions over here. Did I like or did I dislike it? What is the message or the theme? And is it worth reading? So, is Cinderella worth reading? Yes. What are the themes? I put love conquers all, goodness rewarded. Why should somebody read this? Because it's uplifting and inspiring, and it will leave you feeling encouraged. Okay, so now once I've finished with my keyword outline, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to actually write my paragraphs. For the sake of this exercise, I'm only going to do a demonstration of the first and the fifth paragraph because you all know how to do numbers 2, 3, and 4. You've done it many times. So I come back up to my number 1, my intro. I look at the keywords that I've chosen. For my opening sentence, remember I'm doing a dramatic opener, so imagine trapped mansion. So I put up here, imagine you're trapped in a mansion with an evil family. And then I decided to rearrange these because it just made more sense to introduce Cinderella first. So I put, this is what happened in the story of Cinderella, which was written in 1850 by an unknown author. Cinderella is a fairy tale aimed at children, but worthwhile for adults as well. So you can see that I covered all of the information in my keyword outline in my introductory paragraph. Now, moving down to my last paragraph, my conclusion, I'm going to just write sentences based on these keywords here. So, Cinderella is worth reading. It is ultimately a story about how love conquers all and how goodness is rewarded. Cinderella will leave you feeling uplifted, or I could say leave the reader feeling uplifted and inspired, and you will be encouraged to pursue your dreams. Now notice that I never said the word I. I never said I liked Cinderella, or I think Cinderella is worth reading. What we want to train our students to do is state their opinion as fact. And I can't remember if I said this already, but if I did, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. The reason is because if they learn that they do it, then they may discern that other people do it too. And that's really kind of the skill that we want to develop, is that gift of discernment to, you know, when you're reading anything, to think, now, is this someone stating their opinion as fact, or is this actually fact? So that's part of that's part of the reason for this exercise as well, or this unit. So that concludes our introduction to Unit 9, the critique. I will be available from 2:30 to 3 to answer any questions. I sent everyone a link to the WebEx video conference, I guess we'll call it. And that's it. So hope you guys are well. Hope you enjoyed my video presentation. And hopefully we'll all be back together live again soon.